Self-victimization. Self-victimization is this very silly thing that we all do on some level. We all have some lesson that we can think of in the past where we put ourselves in the position of the victim and consider ourselves helpless. Now, as much as we don't like to think that we've done this, we have, and if you sat down with me for 5 minutes, I'll be able to pick out a few things that you do and that I will be able to give a few examples of how that relates to me, because we have all of us, we have way more inner commonalities than we do external differences. Our inner commonalities are vast, huge, amazing. You can go, I have way more in common with a 6-year-old person in Tibet than I do that is different from them. Do you get what I'm saying? We all have some inner commonalities, and we're all bound to put ourselves in this victim category, and the status quo likes to convict, not convince you of. They do try to convince you of this too, but they try to convict you with this idea that you are helpless, and you're not. Now, the reality is, and we've talked about this before, is that you want it to be your fault. I don't know if you want to call this a reality, I misspoke there, but the thing is that you want it to be your fault, because then you have power over the scenario, you can do something about it, that you're not helpless in any scenario. Now, there are positions where people have been victimized, and it's awful and it's a tragedy. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about a true victim. I'm talking about when you put yourself in the bullshit category, like a girl or guy breaks up with you and you're like, oh, like he's such an asshole. That's putting yourself in the victim category. You weren't helpless there. And did you really want that relationship to continue if they didn't want to continue the relationship anyway? No, of course not. My teacher is a jerk. My teacher isn't a good teacher. My teacher doesn't know what they're talking about. Well, is it their responsibility that you learn the stuff? Or is it yours? It's their responsibility to teach and their responsibility to do the best that they possibly can to get you to learn the material, but ultimately they can't crawl inside your head and do it. So does that make them an asshole that you're unwilling to learn the stuff? No, you're being the asshole, right? You're not helpless. You can learn the material. It's not just going to come down to your teacher or your boss or your significant other or the family that you have or the parents that you have, the coach that you have. You have a certain amount of responsibility in this thing. You are not helpless. You're 400 pounds. You are not helpless to lose the weight. I guarantee you that you know enough to make better decisions, right? You're super weak. You can barely get out of a chair because you haven't worked out in 6 years, and you can't walk up a flight of stairs without getting outrageously out of breath. Can you do something about your scenario? Yes, you are not helpless. You are not helpless. You can do something about this, and it's very easy to put yourself in this category of like, oh, no, it's my thyroid, or no, I'm just big boned, or no, I don't have any, I can't because I don't have the time. Right. You can do something. There's something there that you can do. And I think this is a very good practice, is trying to think of what can I do? What can I do? Because that puts the responsibility back on you. You want the responsibility with all this stuff, with the anger, the anxiety, the embarrassment, all of these things that we've talked about here, and this fear of not being enough. You want it to be your fault that you thought that you were not enough. You don't want to go, oh, it's my mom and dad's fault. Oh, it's my teacher's fault. Oh, it's this thing that happened back then. Oh, it's this. No, that was then. Now you have the ability as an adult to logically think back on this moment and go back to that place that is still affecting you and think, what can I learn from this? How would I have done it different now? What can I learn from this? How would I do this today? And kind of self-soothe your way through this. You are not helpless. It is not like you're a victim of the scenarios that happened in your past. We can learn from them. We don't have to self-victimize for the rest of our lives. This is a silly focus, and this is what the status quo tries to convict you with. And I mean convict. I mean, like it's just like, oh, well, yeah, just this is the way that you are, and you can't do anything about it. Bullshit. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, if you want to take the power. If you want to have the focus, to put your focus on being all in with you, then you have the power. And if you have the power, now we can do something about it. Do you see? Do you see how that's so much of a better scenario than, see how that's like a scenario where instead of just coming up with all the problems, you can come up with solutions. This is one of the things, I've been in a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you have too, where everybody's just sitting around complaining and talking about like politics or religion or your work. And they're just complaining, but they don't come up with a solution. It's very easy to point out problems and to criticize other people, but it's very hard to be in the position and do the thing. And you're like, well, if I was there, I would have done this. Well, you get the gift of hindsight. You don't know what you would have done. But we can sit down and we can get all in with us, and then we can see solutions rather than problems. Do you see how in that scenario where all the people were just complaining, they were putting themselves in a victim category and they weren't coming up with a solution? The powerful thing to do in that scenario is to come up with a solution, not to come up with a problem. It's very easy to come up with problems. It's very hard to come up with a solution. But the power is in the solution. It's not your parents' fault. It's not society's fault. It's not politics' fault. It's not religion's fault. It's your fault, and you want it to be your fault. Because ultimately, your experience happened within your mind, and your reaction to all these things that happen around you did have probably an influence on you, but now you can choose the influence by choosing where you put your focus. And you can confront these things that maybe you've been living on for a very long period of time. This gives you very, very much power in your life to experience it how you want, but you're gonna have to shift your focus. You're gonna have to focus on acknowledging the errors of going to that fear of not being enough, because I'm quite positive that you can do your absolute gut-wrenching best in this moment. And if you can do that, doesn't that have to be enough? Because you can't do better than your best, which we're gonna get into in a little bit, but you can't do better than your best, not your absolute gut-wrenching best, so do your best. All right, well now we can be all in, right? So do that. Anyway, I'm gonna shut this one down. You want it to be your fault. There has to be a clarity here between the responsibility of whose is what, and if you understand that someone else is going to anger and they're really just scared, then you don't have to go to anger with them. If you understand that somebody's anxious, you don't have to go to anxiety with them. For one, have you ever seen a situation where where one person went to anger, the other person got angry also, and that it came to a solution? I've never seen it, but I have seen it where one person gets angry, the other person stays calm, and all of a sudden this person can calm down, and then they can find a solution. Okay? It does not help you to drown with your friend. Okay? You want it to be your fault. You want this to be your fault. You want to take the responsibility. You are not helpless. You can do something.